And we're live, I think. Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the weekly meeting for the Merge Request Report Widgets Working Group. And we'll get straight into the agenda. As we've talked about, actually, I have an announcement. DRI's list has been merged and is in the handbook. I'll put the link here. But basically, we got the list from that merge request, from that issue that I opened, and everybody pitched in. Thank you so much for everybody. And the idea there is now we know who to nag and who to ping to ask questions about each widget or just the whole set of widgets together. I didn't find any particular good spot to place this in the handbook. You also felt weird to put it in the docs section of it because it's not about the GitLab. Putting people's names on the documentation of GitLab that goes to customers feels weird. So I put it in the handbook, but if you have other places that would be beneficial to link this from, do open the suggestion MR and I'll be happy to review it and merge it. But right now we have somewhere to look at. I didn't want to put this in the context of the working group because this will be dismantled soon. So the idea there is that at least it lives somewhere that we can reference later. I'm adding this to the section above it in the table initially at the agenda doc so that we can then DRI list. So now we know. That's it. Any questions about that? The DRIs? Cool. Right. And now I wanted to bring up as a discussion item just a bit of an overview about the blockers for the rollout. So Phil was out of office today. He's overseeing the rollout, and I think there's already a couple of issues identified that are blockers at least need to be resolved before we start rolling these out. And the first that I saw was the 204, how we handled that loading state. Fernando, do you have any additional context or information?
Yeah, so we've had a synchronous meeting last week. It was Savas and Phil and I, and Savas has an MR that pipeline's green waiting to be merged. So that should be merged, I think today. And then the follow-up was, and they're not quite blockers, they're just high risk merge requests. And then I'll get to that why they are high risk. So the 204 one more or less introduces the ability, a cleaner ability. It reworks the polling logic a bit. The main concern is that any of these three issues linked here, I think the 204 one he needs for the security widget, which is not feature flagged out. So I think the intent in the global rollout is to have that security widget as part of it. License compliance is kind of lagging behind because they're missing some backend pieces that we need additional data for the UI states. So license compliance is not blocking. But the two follow-up issues, one was a refactor to kind of make polling. What we did is we enabled the ability to pull multiple endpoints versus just the one. Security reports widget pulls like 4 different security endpoints. So it's this weird special case. So that 204 issue is needed for the security widgets, which right now, I guess is intended to be as part of the global rollout. That's why it's blocking. Once that's fixed, we're unblocked. The possible blocker follow-up that I link is a possible blocker. I say this because it refactors the single endpoint, which is used by multiple different widgets that use polling. And it's a potential blocker. I say that because I think we need to be very careful at introducing this at what time, maybe after, before the rollout, but doing it after the rollout blocks other work like license compliance. If we do it before, we need to make sure that the polling works on all these other widgets, kind of regression testing. I don't know how, we have unit tests, but I don't know how we'll have any runtime errors pop up, because the 204 was a runtime error, not caught in unit tests. So that's where I'm kind of leave it up to the team to decide if it's a high risk follow-up MR. We just need to be very thorough when we merge it. I don't think it's a blocker for the rollout. I just do think that after we roll it out and then introduce this MR, we need to be very sure we don't break the things that we just rolled out as new things, these features, the new widgets. And then the expanded section, let me share my screen because I'm talking and not visually showing anything. Okay, so this is the 204. This is the one that has the merge request. I won't go through it right now, but that should unblock security report widget, which I think is the last widget we're waiting on for the global release or global enablement. This one does not block the release, but it does change how polling works for the single endpoint ones. And we just need to make sure that whether we roll this out before or after the enablement is that we don't cause any regressions on any of the prior widgets. So manual testing would probably be useful.
For that particular one, it's being worked on right now, right, on this milestone?
This one, yeah, it's scheduled for 15-1. So Voss is actually going to be picking this one up next Wednesday. I may maybe help him get a head start, but it's assigned to me, but he may be taking it over because he was planning to work on that one as a follow-up to the first one. And then the last one is license compliance specific. I won't go into details why we need it, but unless you're curious, the thing is license compliance, because there's a 204 behavior, even for the expanded data, the thing is endpoints are cached. So the collapsed endpoint and the expanded endpoint are different for the security analyzer endpoints in that the data is based off of the same report, but the endpoint are slightly different. One is the compressed version and one's the expanded version. And when you hit each of those endpoints, we use behind the scenes, I forget what the name of the caching mechanism is, but it needs to rebuild that cache. And then we will pull briefly for like a second or two while that's generated. So I need to basically extend the work that Phil and Savas have been doing for polling for the single endpoint to the expanded one. And then, again, but that's not a blocker for the rollout. Actually, I should probably move it then. But that's all I got.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I will defer to Phil to kind of like orchestrate this blockers, non-blockers. But I would say that if it's coming on 15.1 and we're starting to roll it out now, it might fall into place at the right time anyway, before we turn it on for everybody. Because we're still going to have to, roll it out to staging, give it a shot, see how it's working out. And then by the time that we're ready to turn it on for production, we might just have this merged already. So I would say just keep on pushing. The one I have here documented is a telemetry related bug because we're working on adding telemetry from the base core component so that we can have telemetry for all widgets. And there was an identified bug that was causing a lot of remounts and stuff that was causing some overcounts. So we're going to be addressing that in 15.1. Hopefully, like I said, all of this will fall into place in 15.1 and we can start rolling it out for staging and then production in this milestone. So stay tuned. Right. So any more known blockers that we haven't covered yet? Okay.
I'm curious, have we done any validation that like the UI to revisit all the widgets and make sure they all look the same? Because we've had MRs land that tweak styles, and I don't know if we've actually, it may fix the styling for one widget, but may have broken other ones in the process. Widgets that have been reviewed and had UX review prior, but we haven't gone back and revalidated. So I think we should, as an exercise, I don't know if we can track a separate issue or have each DRI spin up, a local instance, and before we get the thumbs up, kind of like, I'm thinking like a rocket launch, right? Having each group kind of
turnkey,
it's like, security widgets for go, yeah. So I'm having each, maybe it's part of that I don't know, the rollout issue, to have each team spin up at what their respective widget and make sure that visually we don't have any UX regressions. Because I know, like I said, we've had styling tweaks land not too long ago, maybe like this last milestone. And yeah.
Gina, you have a question?
Oops, yes. We have the MR links above. I'm just wondering, because it might be easier than having to like clone the project and everything to spin it up locally. Could we just use those and do the testing there? I'm guessing all of those get the updates that we've been making?
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
that's the production code. So I feel like that's a reasonable thing rather than running it in separated instance. I think it's just a cheaper way to make the same results. But I think it's a good idea to have each DRI explicitly approve the launch. So that's one of the things that Phil will be taking care of as rolling it out. Once we have these blockers solved out and we're starting to effectively turn on the feature flags and stuff, those pings will start to roll out and expect like an approval from each one of them. Yeah.
Also, when you said DRI, are you talking about development DRI or UX DRI?
Okay. I thought about that when I was doing the MR. So the DRIs that have been identified, they're the engineering DRIs for the code of each widget.
Yeah.
That is not to say that we will not check UX. I would say that part of the rollout, some of you or you all will be pinged as like a UX review of the rollout or something. So I'll put a note here. Let's make sure the UX team is also included in final checks. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Does it help identifying UX DRI? Just because, like, at least for the security stuff, it's Becca, but I don't know. I mean, I think the team knows that, but that's just because we've been all working closely recently. But
we can update the list of DRIs to have a column for engineering and a column for UX if it helps. Would that help?
I don't think it could hurt. I mean, I'm okay. I mean, I passively know who to go to, but I've only worked with Becca, Jeremy, and Gina, so I don't know if there's anyone else. So that's my go-to 3.
Okay.
Yeah, making it official probably wouldn't hurt.
Sorry, Yannick, I didn't hear that.
Having it officially written down probably wouldn't hurt. That's what I just said.
Okay, so maybe a good idea to have UX DRIs identified too. Okay, so I need a candidate to identify them. I can do the MR updating, but I needed a candidate to do the issue to identify them all, or just tell me who are the DRIs. Are you able to do that, Gina?
Yeah, I can start. So start an issue and
collect who is the DRI for each one of the widgets.
okay, I think I know most of them, so it will just be.
Right. I can give you an example of the issue that I used for mine.
Okay.
So something similar to this. Example for engineering. So that's the list of the widgets that we have identified that are in development or already developed. So we'd have to have a UX person for each one of those. It's probably be the same for a lot of them, but yeah. Ping me when it's done and I can set up an MR to update the documentation page to have another column for product design UX. GRs.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Right, so moving on to the next point. So I'm piggybacking on what Kai suggested on Slack, and it feels like there's like we've been almost there for quite a few weeks, and I think we all felt that. And as we're seeing, even though we're seeing movement and things are being resolved and everything, I think it would be very useful to have a clear way of knowing what's left, right? What's left to do for the launch and what's left to do for the working group. So I can update the template of the meeting to have another section of like having this list, a checklist of like where we are for each one of the steps. So I feel like, Andre, I can't type my name. Andre will update the meeting template to have a checklist now with which items. So one would be rollout blockers, and then we'll have the 204, the telemetry. I'm going to keep the ones that Fernando highlighted as non-blockers because they could be, I'll leave that to Phil. And then please feel free to update the list as we go. The other thing that I would like to see is like missing tasks for the working group. So missing goals for the working group. And these are things that we need to accomplish before we dismantle the working group and then let the process run itself. Does anyone have any concrete goals that we still need to nail and we haven't? I'm going to bring up the exit criteria now. So let's take a look at it together. Right. So Shepherd implementation and redesign of 10 extensions. I feel like we're not sure if we have the deal. Do we have 10 already? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So 10 are being worked on. So that's good. The shared components follows the report regions design guidelines. So I feel like now we're in a stage that I think pretty much everything has been implemented. So Jeremy and Gina, if you know anything from the reports regions design guidelines or the framework that is not implemented yet, do let us know. I think we have good coverage there. So probably we need just a review of documentation. I feel like that's the last bit. After we roll it out to customers and the rollout is successful and we make the feature flag default to be on, we have to have documentation in place to make sure that we know how to add new widgets and what's the process there. So probably going to have someone in charge of reviewing documentation. And does anybody want to take that task upon themselves to complete? Thanks, Gina. I can ask. So one of the things that I've had chats in the past with our technical writer is Amy Qualls should definitely be available to help revise like the wording and the text and everything, but we need someone to drive the documentation review. So I'll probably ping the team members, so the working group members, and try to come up with a candidate to do that, or I can do it myself. But right now the priority is to roll out. So I feel like that would be the final bit for the working group, right? Apart from that, we're good to go. My fear is that if we dismantle the working group before we roll it out, it might just linger longer than if we don't. So let's make that also a goal, like default feature flag to on, just to make sure that it's there.
So,
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, timeline wise. So just to clarify, it seems like would the goal be this milestone, just so we have something to go towards, would be to have this enabled by the end of the milestone. I think we're at that stage, or is that pushing it?
I'll be honest that I don't expect it to be feasible to have it default on to customers in 15.1, because we have ongoing development, and then we still want to have a good period of time where it's enabled for GitLab for our own projects on production, at least I would say 2 weeks minimum. And if we don't finish it off in like a week or so, then we're already late turning it on 15.1. So I think realistically, defaulting the feature flag to on would be 15.2. 15.1, definitely starting to see that in production. That would be a goal. So I can make that a sub goal of like enabled in prod in 15.1, enabled by default for all in 15.2. So I'm going to put that as a template of the meeting, and we'll try to follow through that thing. And I'll identify someone to update to do the revision of the docs to see what's missing, if everything is okay. And I'll try to identify someone. And yeah, any more thoughts?
I added, possible blocker. Sorry, it came to mind. I'd rather add it late than not mention it at all. Small one, but I have, right now I've only can speak for license compliance. It's some minor UX kind of edge case where if we're using link and supporting text, we'll end up kind of with this big gap and then this stuff goes together. So I did have a fix, which kind of made it look like this. The text would wrap to the next level, but it doesn't look that nice. But this is something that I don't know if we need more UX feedback on, or if the solution I I kind of came up with is fine. Again, all I did is just kind of tweak the styles, but it's not changing the elements per se, other than what it kind of looks like. But basically what happens when the supporting text is very long, and it will just wrap to the next line, kind of like this. So if that's okay, and I only know this applies to license compliance, I don't know if the other widgets have enough multi-line content to see these problems. That's why, again, I was cautious. It's a possible blocker. So I don't know with certain data sets for certain widgets if this may manifest. So I don't know if you consider a blocker or just like, but at least for license compliance, it seems to be, because it just looks really awful if it's not. So just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I defer to UX and Phil on whether they think, but at least it's called out.
Yeah, just get it reviewed by UX, and as whether it's a blocker or not. I mean, functionality wise, it's working, but we definitely want to ship something in a good shape. So I'll treat it as a blocker, but definitely sounds like a small effort either. So the other ones seem a little bit longer to solve, but I don't want us to get to a position where we're like every single like low severity cosmetic potentially tweak to stop the launch. I think we need to get this out in front of people as quickly as possible so that we can start getting like proper feedback. And it's that conflict of iteration. Like we want to release early and iterate, but then we also don't want to release something that is not properly filling our requirements, so to speak. So, but we've faced that in code review a lot, where we're shipping something that we know has a bug, but it's a low severity bug, but we know that the bug exists. Should we stop the launch? And sometimes we deal with that, and usually the answer is to just release it and follow quickly with an iterative fix. So that would be my recommendation here. Is I wouldn't put this as an official blocker, but we want to fix it for release.
Fair enough, and I think that's a good compromise.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Super small thing on agenda hygiene, missing goals. Would it be okay if I rename this to new goals? Because missing sounds like we're failing.
They're not new goals. They're let's make it not a goal. Maybe to do.
To do's left.
To do's left. Yeah, for the
Gotcha.
working group. Yeah. Thanks, Yannick. Much better.
Sweet.
Right. And then I'll update the meeting template to reflect this and the doc review as well, so that then we can, once we have those things checked, then we can close off the working group. We'll have a ceremony, so do show up for the closing of the working group. But yes, so I'll keep you posted on that. But otherwise, I feel like we're in a good spot, and let's hope to follow the plan, like enabling this in production 15.1 and then default all in 15.2. Any more points that we need to discuss today? All right, then thank you, everyone. It's been great. We're almost there, people. All right, have a great weekend. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.